stove and lumber. He loved to collect lumber, tree limbs, everything, just anything he could find was stacked in the front porch, to the point where the porch was not usable. You could not go through the front door, which also is not unusual for a farmhouse or an old large house out in the country. You probably have grandparents too. You may remember back going to visit somebody in the country. You never went in the front door. Anyway, you went in the kitchen door. And the kitchen was where most people spent their time after dinner or during dinner, and they would gravitate back to the kitchen, partially because in those older houses, that's the room that was best heated. And also, just a good place to end up. In fact, if you come to dinner at our house, you very often end up in the kitchen after dinner anyway, for quite a while. So he found that, and he discovered he had to go around in through the door on the east side, which was the kitchen door, and he went to the side. And what he saw inside is probably the reason why his bid was extremely small. The kitchen was, if you can imagine, in your mind's eye, and that's kind of the fun of giving this program, and that is for you to imagine in your mind what some of these rooms look like, and then at the end we'll show you some pictures, and show you some of the rooms as they actually look, and see if they fit the picture you have in your mind. The kitchen, however, was kind of the last bastion, and this is where they lived their days out. Over on the east side was a breakfast nook. I looked around and I think everybody here probably old enough to know what a breakfast nook is. You get much younger, and you know, the young person's eyes glaze over, and the breakfast nook means nothing to them. And the breakfast nook were two steel cots, and that's where they took up their end residence in there. The kitchen was a large square room. In the middle was what I call a Franklin stove. It did not like Franklin stove because he was just deathly afraid of fire, so there was no heat in the house. Hanging down from the ceiling above the stove is a light bulb, just hanging a bare light bulb. There is a piano bench, a kitchen table, several chairs, two cots, and that's the furniture. Then scattered around and stacked everywhere are boxes of books, periodicals, newspapers tied up with string everywhere. To the point when you look around, you don't see the piano. It has become completely covered over with stuff. Nothing of great interest, as I said, newspapers and magazines and papers and clothing. And then, if you can imagine the room, then just packed with stuff like this. And if you can kind of imagine taking the ceiling off the room and bringing in a dump truck load of junk and dust and dirt and rags and just letting it filter down over everything. This is the way the room was. So it's not unusual. The bid that they got was literally nothing for the books. Well, at that point, they realized that temporarily they have no one really interested in the books at all. And as they're considering what to do, the news of Fitzpatrick's death has reached a man in Denver by the name of Malcolm Glenn, Glenn Wire. I believe that the Glenn in his name is a family name, perhaps his mother's maiden name, something like that. He was a former head of the University of Nebraska Library. And as such, he probably knew a little bit about Thomas Jefferson Fitzpatrick, or at least that he had a library. And at this point in time, 1952, he is the librarian emeritus of the Denver Public Library. Well, he sees that Fitzpatrick has died, and he writes a letter to a man in Kansas City whose name is Francis Glenn, Glenn. And I've not been able to trace it down, but my feeling is that there was a relationship somehow, even if it was somewhat extended. And he told Francis Glenn to get over to Lincoln and take a look at this library, that he should take a bid on it. So Francis Glenn in Kansas City contacts Lloyd Chapman, the attorney in Lincoln, and asks permission to come up and look at the books. And of course, they were ecstatic about getting a second appraisal or look at the books. So they invited him to come up. He came up by train, and when he came into the house, of course, he comes in through the kitchen door as well, and looks in and sees the same thing that is probably as far as the man from Nebraska looked at. We don't know, because we don't know who it was, nobody would admit it. All of us who ultimately worked at Nebraska Book or had a relation with Nebraska Book have a couple of pretty good ideas. We have, it really had to be one of less than half a dozen people, but no one will admit it, reasonably so. But Francis Glenn has invested in the price of a railroad ticket to come up all the way from Kansas City. So, although he's off-put perhaps by the kitchen full of junk, he, like anyone who buys book collections, knows that there's always more than you see immediately. And one of the questions usually is if you see a collection of books and it's not too startling, you always say, where's the stuff you're going to throw away? And that's sometimes where the good stuff is. Because most people who have a collection of books think, here's a Bible that's not only really, really old, but it's even written in German. That's got to be the most valuable part. Well, that's the thing that's worth nothing. And the pamphlets and stuff that are out and back that are being thrown away, and chicken coop or whatever, that's sometimes the best part of all. So he did the one thing that Nebraska Book Man probably didn't do. And he opened the door, which went from the kitchen into what had in the back room. Now when he opened the door into that room, he saw a room full of books. Now make in your mind, take a snapshot of what you think a room full of books is. And then most people come up with a room. It would be smaller than this room, not a rectangle, and it would have bookshelves from the floor to the ceiling on all the walls, full of books. And if they're small books, they would be pushed to the back and another row of books in front. And then if you collect books at all, you know that then the top of the books and the bottom of the shelf above it, there's always a little room. So you can fill that in with books laying horizontally. And then, I like a nice easy chair, sitting over on one side, and a gooseneck lamp, and a library table. And the library table is stacked with books. There will be books under the library table. There will be stacks of books beside the chair. There'll be books stacked all over on the floor everywhere. So it's covered. And that's what most people think a room full of books is. But that is not a room full of books. That is a room with some books. Now, let's start over with the room. And let's take on the south side, where there is what we today would call a picture window, which is just a large window. And since we're going to have to cover that, we're going to board over that right away. Now we have a vanilla box. A box which has a door at one end leading to the kitchen, and a door on the other end which leads into the hallway. Now we're going to start along one wall. Let's start along the south wall just for fun. And we're going to lay books along the bottom with the spines in so we can read them. And then we'll stack books from the floor clear to the ceiling.